Okay, moving on to the next segment of today's show. I wanted to get into another game that went down this week, and this was a result that surprised me. And it's not surprising because of who won, but it's surprising how much they won by. And let's go to the Big East because I wanted to talk about Creighton and their big-time 86-70 victory over Villanova. And one thing I will say is when you compare the Big East to some of the other conferences in college basketball, I do think it's been a little bit under the radar this season. I think Villanova having a couple COVID pauses could have something to do with that. Creighton, we're going to get to their ceiling, and if they could turn this win into a run that they haven't necessarily had so far this season, but they've been a little bit under the radar. UConn has dealt with COVID pauses. So has Xavier. Providence and Marquette haven't really lived up to the hype. Seton Hall has been at best. So the Big East, I think, has been a conference so far this season. It hasn't really been getting that much attention. And the league overall, it hasn't really been that good. And I think that is why this victory for Creighton on Saturday was super important, because Creighton very quietly was turning into a very disappointing basketball team. They lost at Butler. That's a game that you should win every time. They lost to Providence at home. When you're Creighton and you're facing a struggling Providence team at home, that's a game you should probably win. They lost to Georgetown at home. That is the worst one. When you are a league like the Big East that is trying to establish itself as one of the premier leagues in college basketball, that can happen. But Creighton, since that loss against Georgetown, has gone on the road to Marquette and won. And I'm telling you, Marquette isn't very good. I totally understand that. But it is never easy to win a conference road game, especially when you were a team like Creighton that was lacking some confidence. So if you could go on the road to whoever and get the job done, that is something to be happy about. They then go to Georgetown and win by 15. And that's a good sign, because that showed me that after taking a bad home loss to Georgetown, only a couple days later, Creighton was able to bounce back, respond, and get the dub over the Hoyas. But then came Saturday, where Creighton beats Villanova 86-70, and this was by far and away Creighton's best performance of the season. And many people, including myself, before the season started, pegged Creighton as a team that, when is all said and done, maybe they could beat Villanova in the Big East. Because earlier in the show, when we were talking about Michigan, right, one of the things I spoke about was the fact that Michigan, part of what makes their turnaround and their team so good this season, and what makes the coaching job that Juwan Howard has done so impressive, is the fact that Michigan, they brought back some guys from their roster last year, but not the full squads that Baylor and Gonzaga and Virginia and Illinois, teams like that, brought back. Well, another team that was really good last year, and by really good, I mean top 10, top 12 good, a team that would have been like a 2 or 3 seed in the NCAA tournament, that's Creighton. Creighton won a share of the Big East title last year, and they were phenomenal. And I understand they lost Tyshawn Alexander, and that loss has been brutal. I do believe if you put him on Creighton, they are a team right now that is competing for a national championship, but maybe it has just taken Creighton some time without Tyshawn Alexander to get everyone locked in, to get everyone on the same page, and to get everyone on this Creighton team ready towards maybe making another run at a Big East title. Because when you look at the Big East standings right now, they're actually looking pretty close. Creighton is 12-4. Villanova is 8-2. Creighton only 1 game back from Villanova. So I think that with this win, maybe we could see Creighton kind of gains some momentum from this win and go into March with that. But one thing that Greg McDermott said that really stood out to me was that Creighton has been the hunted for a month. And I think that when you're a team like that, a team like Creighton, who really since the creation of the new Big East. Yeah, they've had their good years. They had Doug McDermott for that one good year, and we all know how spectacular he was. But usually, you guys know where Creighton stands. They're usually right above that bubble line. Sometimes they'll find themselves in the bubble conversation, but I feel like the Blue Jays are always a team that is competitive and in the mix, and I feel like that's what the case is with a lot of these Big East teams. Creighton usually, in a normal year, I would feel like, is kind of what Xavier and UConn are right now, but anyways, Creighton has really gone into this season as one of the best teams in the Big East, one of the best teams in college basketball, and a team that has a legitimate shot at making a big, long run in March. And I feel like with Creighton this season, part of the reason why they were struggling, as Greg McDermott, said, was the fact that when you look at Creighton, every game they're getting team's best shot. And when Villanova was out for a couple weeks with COVID, they were really considered by many to be the best team in the Big East. And the fact that they went out there on Saturday and not only beat Villanova, but they tore them apart. Like, they literally could not miss a shot. And it was a really, really impressive shooting effort by the Creighton Blue Jays. The other thing that really stood out to me in this game was Marcus Zagorowski. He finally had a game that made us say, after we watched, okay, now that is the Marcus Zagorowski that was healthy for the first and majority of last year. Like, that is the guy we are going to need if this team wants to be successful. And this is the guy that I had as my preseason Big East Player of the Year. He had knee surgery in the spring, and then he was out again for 6 weeks in October and November. In January, another short setback hampered him. But he is just about healthy now. And look here, 25 points, season high against Villanova. If this is what Creighton could bank on a nightly basis going forward, then this team could make the Final Four, and they could win the Big East. They're that good, and we saw Creighton just go out there against Villanova and dominate, and Creighton plays a very fun and entertaining style of basketball. I think that if they were to get hot, they would be a team that many people would be attracted to very easily. Zagorowski, Mahoney, we know the fast and frenetic pace that not only this year, but also in years past, Greg McDermott has played with this Creighton Blue Jays group of guys. And the fact that they went out there against Villanova on Saturday, and once again, I'm not shocked that they won, but the fact that they were just able to dominate like they did was super, super impressive. And this is a Villanova team that, let's keep in mind, like, they faced St. John's not too long ago, and this same thing happened. So right now, in my top 25, people have been asking me, when you compare the current Big East, how would you look at Villanova and Creighton? How would you compare those two teams? And right now, I have Villanova ranked as my number 11 team in college basketball. I have Creighton ranked as my number 16 team in college basketball, but I do think as time goes on, that gap is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and Creighton may be a team to watch going forward, because we know in the preseason just how much stock we put into Zagorowski and Jefferson and Mahoney and all of the experience that this team has. Once again, super unfortunate that Tyshawn Alexander is no longer in a Blue Jay uniform, and he's doing some good things in the NBA right now. But the problem is that if he was back, I think this Creighton team could be even better than they are right now, and they're really good. But anyways, obviously the kid made the best decision for himself, and, nothing but respect and props to that. But how about Creighton, man? That was just a phenomenal performance, and if they could build off that, if they could, going forward, win some more games, especially when you consider the upcoming schedule they have, isn't necessarily too difficult. Upcoming, they will host DePaul, that should be a win. Go to Xavier, interesting. Go to Nova, host Butler. If you're Creighton and you could close out the season 3-1 and go into the Big East tournament with some momentum, I think that would be the most ideal situation if you are a fan of the Blue Jays going forward. And if you're a fan of Villanova, look, right now, if you ask me, are you winning the Big East? Yeah, probably. Your next couple games are home against UConn. That's going to be a good one. Home against St. John's, at Butler, home Creighton, at Providence. Right now, if you ask me, gun in my head, who is winning the Big East, I would still say Villanova, but a lot of that just has to do with the fact that they're going to be at home in their next game against Creighton, and their schedule is just a tad easier. That game at Xavier, I believe Creighton should actually be pretty careful with that one, because that is a game where Xavier could definitely win it. And I watched the Musketeers up close and personal for the first time in a while this past weekend against the UConn Huskies. And UConn, that was actually an impressive win. They went into the Cintas Center and ended up getting the job done. But Creighton is going to be a team to watch going forward, because assume they could beat DePaul at home Saturday at Xavier, the 27th of February, 5 o'clock. It's going to be interesting, because Creighton, they are fortunate. They are one of the only teams in college basketball that I know of that hasn't gone through a COVID break yet. And I think that could actually be another factor in the fact that prior to this game against Villanova, Creighton was taking a loss at home against Georgetown. That's not necessarily a loss you would expect them to take. The same thing could be said about their loss against the Providence Friars at home and against Butler on the road. These were not losses we expected Creighton to take, and even in their wins, it wasn't like they were blowing teams out and looking like the team we expected them to. But with Zagorowski back in the mix and having him go off for 25 against Villanova the other night, Creighton could be a team where we turn around by March and all of a sudden they are one of the hotter teams in college basketball. And that game, the 27th against Xavier on the road, that is going to tell me a lot about who Creighton is. You guys know, if you listen to this show, that as great as it is to get a big-time home victory, and as impressive as those are, there is nothing more impressive to me than a team showing me the ability to just being able to go on the road and get a big-time dub. And Creighton has to show me that against Xavier. You look at Creighton's true road wins this season. It hasn't been great. St. John's, UConn was a good one. Providence, Butler, they lost. Seton Hall, they won. That was a good one. So Creighton has showed some signs, and I understand home court advantage isn't necessarily the same this year as it's been in years past, considering the fact that there are no fans in the buildings. But at the same time, I still think the fact that you're playing at your own home court and your gym and you're sleeping in your own bed, that does mean a lot. So Creighton is going to be a team that I'm going to be keeping my eye on going forward. I think the Big East race could get very, very competitive, and it could accumulate at the Big East tournament. I think Creighton and Villanova right now are the two best teams in this league, and Creighton showed me on Saturday they could compete with the big boys.